Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie and Ssanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Abercrombie, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Samuel Sanchez. Hello, Sam.
How's it going, big man?
Doing pretty good. Well, we decided to take a departure from, we originally had a 5-episode divorce podcast prepared, but we decided to deviate from that due to the pandemic crisis we got going on in the world right now, and we thought we would bring on some guests to talk about it. So we definitely are bringing on the better half of my relationship. My lovely wife, Christy, is on with us. Hi, Christy.
Hi.
And we brought on Sam's lovely significant other, Miss Dena Wilson.
Hello. Thank you all so much for having me on.
Who also happens to be an attorney and can also lend us her opinion on some of the legal matters we're going to be talking about today. And we brought my wife on, who is not an attorney, but she can provide us with, kind of a real world kind of layman's perspective on some of the issues we're going to be talking about. So just, generally speaking, this COVID-19 coronavirus thing is a new thing, and it hasn't been around very long. And it's obviously unprecedented, and we haven't seen anything like it in the legal community ever. So, Sam?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is obviously uncharted territory. And, it raises a lot of different kinds of concerns across the board, not just, in areas of divorce or in child custody, but we obviously have podcasts that deal with, real estate law, civil transactional law, estate planning, and really across the board, this is something that has affected life in general. That it's never going to be the same, at least not in the short term.
So let's we've come up with a series of a few questions we want to address to everybody. I guess let's talk a little bit about what legal concerns does everybody have? I know that's a very, very general question, but I know the biggest thing going around right now is with respect to, we just finished up spring break. Now that the kids aren't going back to school because school's canceled, what does that look like for a possession schedule? And
I'll take that one up. Yeah, I'll take that one, and we can kind of pass it around the horn. Obviously, I've been contacted by a lot of clients who, either are in the process of getting divorced, are divorced and have orders that, really kind of lay out, for the most part, both in Florida and in Texas, specifically what times you're going to get to enjoy around the spring break period, even, like holidays that are coming up like Easter. And, what this has done is, one, with schools pretty much across the country being out, it really has extended those holidays and those periods of possession. But using Texas as an example, Texas's Supreme Court came out and said, nope, here's the way we're going to handle those types of issues. The order is it's going to be as if that period of possession ended, like school went right back into session. And so, that's confusing for parents because it's not like people are out there watching legal notices. As lawyers, I'm sure Dena, myself, you, Bryan, these are things that we're paying attention to. But the everyday person is worried about toilet paper and frozen goods. This is not something that's really crossing their mind. And, I would just encourage people who are listening, who have, concerns or questions, is reach out to competent counsel. If you need to set up an initial consultation with an attorney to be able to get some insight. If you already have an attorney, you really need to be getting information from them. If you haven't received something, then, it's okay to reach out to them and say, hey, give me some clarity on these points.
So Dena, I know that I've actually seen two very well-respected attorneys disagree on this issue of the possession order says when spring break begins and when it ends. So I've seen two well-respected attorneys. One said it ends when they go back to school, and the other one said, no, it goes by the regular school calendar. So what do you think?
Well, I can tell you that, I primarily practice in Tarrant County, Texas, and also some surrounding counties as well. But Tarrant County courts put out an order because they anticipated this was going to be an issue. And they issued an order stating that it's the policy of their court that spring break ends when it was scheduled to end. Meaning, and also went further to say, so your possession for spring break is not extended because the schools are not going to be back in session. So, what I did today was I sent out a letter to all of my clients, no matter what stage of their case that they're in, to let them know about this, because the schools are using the language, quote unquote, extending spring break. So that was really causing a lot of confusion, I think. And so the courts here said, no, while school is technically, out and it's going to be extended, if you will, spring break ends as it was supposed to. So you're going to have the same possession, and then they go back to the parent they were supposed to go back to.
So, Christy, you're a non-lawyer, so give us a real-world perspective on this thing.
Well, as a mom and a child of divorced parents, I think if you're having questions about legal issues concerning your kids' time with each parent, or right now there aren't activities, but I know some activities are still open. I know my daughter's swimming school is still having classes, and my son's baseball team is still having practices for the time being anyway. So, I think that you need to make sure that as a parent, you're doing your due diligence and looking and checking information on your school's website. If you have a lawyer that you can ask, or someone that or even put it out on social media to help with any questions, I think that's the best way to kind of handle some of these issues that come up. And right now, obviously, we're in unprecedented territory as a country for this pandemic. So it's important to make sure that you're talking to your kids about it, what that looks like for them as school is out for the time being, and not quite sure when things are going to happen. And just to make sure you're working with your partner in the best way that you can, in whatever way that looks, because ultimately it's the kids that are really going to need the help as they're at home, and it can cause issues of isolation and issues of non-socialization. So just make sure, as you, the parents, are working together to make sure the kids understand what's going on and feel comfortable within their kind of new normal for the time being.
And that brings up a good point. So, how do you co-parent in a situation like this? Because you've got obviously kids going to be out of school for an extended period of time. I've heard, some schools aren't going back till the end of March. Some schools have just closed for the first week. Some schools are out till April. How do you co-parent in a situation like this?
Well, and Bryan, to just jump in for a split second, obviously this is an ever-changing situation. I would tell you that, as we're speaking, things are changing. The president just had a press conference that says, there's a lockdown, really a federally, recommended lockdown, no groups larger than 10. And he's saying that he anticipates this could go into August. So, we're really looking at, a substantial period of time that these types of things are going to be very relevant, both legally and just in the real world.
And then you've got situations where homeschooling is probably going to start becoming a thing. People are going to have to start making sure their kids get some sort of educational value while they're out. How does that look? How do you work with a partner or with an ex on a homeschooling arrangement?
Yeah, go ahead, Dena.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think Dena would have some interesting perspective on that as an attorney, and as a person who obviously practices in that area primarily.
Well, really just going back to the more broad question, Bryan, that you asked, how do you co-parent during this time period? And I can tell you that, I myself am divorced. My ex-husband and I have a great relationship. I think that we co-parent extremely well. So obviously, I think that my experience as an attorney in this field has helped with that, with that relationship and what that looks like. But, in this situation, I can tell you that I just had that conversation today, with him because he still works out in the public. He's still having to deal with people. And, I am fortunately in a situation that I can work from home with all of this going on. So we discussed everything and came to the agreement that while this is going on and he's still having to be out and about at all, that, he's just going to do video chatting every day just because, we're both looking out for what's best to protect our son. So
And
that's what we felt like for right now, what we could do.
And that also that brings up another question of, exposure potentially. Obviously, if people aren't living together, there's the potential for one person to get exposed and the other person not. And then you're bringing it in from one house to another house, potentially, if your kids go back and forth. But kids still need to see both parents. So, I mean, it's a very, very tricky situation. And like I said, we're in uncharted water here. And if you have a dispute with your ex, unless it's an absolute, life and death emergency, don't expect that you're going to get a court hearing anytime soon, because that's another problem. They're not really running the courts right now, except on emergency basis.
No, I would tell you to that point, Brian, like looking at, there have been declarations or what we would call implementive orders from both the Texas Supreme Court and the Florida Supreme Court that have specifically stated, unless it's an exigent circumstance, and these are typically removals, meaning that there's, the threats to a child's life due to abuse, there's protective orders. If it's not one of those things, you're really getting put on the back burner. It's very unlikely that you're going to have access to the courts. In Texas, I know specifically that they are having right now hearings in front of the Texas Supreme Court about establishing new parameters to operate courts in this environment, meaning that, does that mean video conferencing? Does that mean, how are you going to authenticate pleadings? Like things still, because business still has to happen. People still have to be able to get clarity on orders, especially in a situation, to Dena's point, that says, hey, you know what, there is no school. Well, we all know that in Texas, there's a standard possession schedule a lot of times that people are utilizing, and it really doesn't encompass or anticipate these types of issues. Now, there's, this one little tagline in a lot of orders that say, hey, any undetermined time goes to a certain parent. But how fair is that? And then you're talking about substantial expense, so does that affect, child support obligations potentially? If you're in a divorce, and you still need to get divorced, what is happening with the property and temporary possession and expenses if people have to stay home and can't work? I mean, the legal implications are far reaching.
And then you have, the issue of daycare. I mean, obviously daycares are not operating right now. So you've got, who takes care of the kids if one parent has to work? All of those kinds of things are big issues. Well, one of the other questions I'd like to throw around to the room is, suppose there's, this is more of maybe a individual tort claim or a negligence claim. What about if somebody exposes you to this virus? What does that look like from a legal perspective?
Well, I would tell you, Brian, at least from my perspective, having dealt with some tort law litigation in the past, I definitely think that there's going to be some, and we can anticipate some litigation on this issue. I think if you look at it and it's careless, because, as an example, I don't know if anybody's, seen all these images that, if you're 21 and you're still out and it's spring break and you're packed in these bars or restaurants, just kind of flaunting the directives that are coming from the CDC or the federal government or your state and local government. Do you have some potential exposure legally in that? I would think you do, especially if there's going to be, mandates, federal mandates, state mandates that say, hey, this is what we are not supposed to be doing. And you flaunt them, and then you bring that virus home or take it to a friend's, and, they have a relative who passes away. You're going to talk about wrongful death suits. I mean, there's definitely some exposure there. Now, litigating that is going to be extremely complex because how do you know where you got it, right? Pinpointing a virus is difficult, but they're getting much more precise in how they're able to track this and its spread. And I think you definitely should err on the side of caution rather than risking, people's health and then obviously your financial or personal health as well.
And I just want to either ask a question or add, isn't there precedent set for that in other illnesses? Like people knowingly having, let's say, for example, HIV/AIDS and knowingly passing it on to somebody. Aren't there legal precedents that have been set for that? Is this the same kind of thing?
I mean, it very well could be. I mean, I think it's so new, and we're finding out new and stuff every day about how the virus is transmitted, and sometimes people can walk around not knowing that they have it, and then if somebody knowingly has it, I think yes, they had talked about prosecutions potentially and things like that if somebody knowingly has it and passes it along, but they've also have talked about a large area of uncertainty with regard to that.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to be treading on new water there, Christy, to be able to kind of chase it down. But I guarantee you, if there's lawyers out there that are contemplating this, it's definitely something that they find somebody out there who has a wealth of resources. They're going to chase it down. And even if you don't, even if they think we may be able to attack somebody via let's say a claim against their homeowner's insurance. We went to a party. They knew that they were feeling sick. They didn't tell us. Now we're all ill. My grandparent who lives at my home with me, or my child got ill and I have medical expenses. I guarantee you that if they can kind of put those two things together, it'll absolutely, very likely, instigate litigation.
Let's talk about this. And this affects everybody, lawyers and non-lawyers alike. Have you had to make any tough decisions based upon the new, obviously the federal and state directives are changing on a daily basis, but have you had to make any tough decisions concerning life or concerning things you normally do based on these directives?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, obviously, the decision that was made as far as, my son going back and forth, that was a very difficult decision. He participates in sports as well. He is in judo, has very, very close face-to-face contact. And I actually made the decision a couple of weeks ago with this happening that I was just going to err on the side of caution and go ahead and take him out and not remove him, as though he's never going to go back, but just go ahead and sit out while this is going on. So things like that, I kind of thought about it, and I know that sometimes I can be an overly cautious person, but that's just how I deal with things, and that's how I feel better about situations, is to feel like I'm prepared and that I did what I needed to do. But so I've basically just kind of looked at it and said, is it necessary? Is it something that is an absolute necessity? Now, obviously, if they wouldn't have canceled school and that was going on today, it would have worried me all day today for him to go to school because he has friends that were traveling for spring break in his classroom and all of that. But, at the end of the day, I would have had to have thought about it and say, well, he's got to go to school. I can't just keep him home because I want to, but I don't have to send him to that activity and put him in danger.
That's a good point, because Go ahead, Christy, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say some of the decisions we've had to make too. I mean, I have boomer parents that live a mile from us whom we see often with our children, and they came by, I think, on Sunday, and we had just been on 2 planes and 2 airports in a different state at a confined water park that is not air exposed. And so I was concerned about even seeing them because I did not potentially want to pass. If I had it, I don't even know. Now they're saying you can have it and have symptoms. And not show symptoms, but you can still pass it. So we're wrestling with the decision of, do we even let the kids see them? Do we just stay completely away? Also with the baseball, they're still having tournaments over the weekend. And, we were just talking about how, the edict from the baseball organization was, well, kids just want to play. Parents, want their kids to play. And that's fine. But I think these larger organizations have a social responsibility to the community to say, you know what, we're going to do our part and everything we can to follow the guidelines and not put many people at risk, especially at an open air baseball tournament where people of all ages, from babies to grandparents, are coming in and out, going to the not so clean restrooms, going to the concession stand, and then potentially, contacting this disease. So there have definitely been some spirited discussions going on in our house.
I think we made the decision as a family that we're just pulling our son out of this until this is over with, because it's just youth sports at the end of the day, and it's just baseball, and it's just soccer went ahead and made the wise decision of shutting down, but it doesn't seem like baseball's following that same thing. But we just made the decision as a family that we're not going to expose our child to this, and it's just going to have to be him taking a break for a while.
Yeah, and the challenge behind everything that you guys are saying, it's obviously very wise, and I wish that all people would have that kind of wisdom as they anticipate and hear these new directives. I mean, no more than 10 people, and that's unheard of, right? All the things that are happening around us are completely unprecedented and unheard of, and it's a sad state of affairs to see that individuals, even after getting this type of directive, aren't really listening to officials, or just kind of like flaunting in the face of it and saying, well, we're going to do what we want to do anyways. And I do think that in situations like you guys, you're making smart decisions as parents. I guess the turnaround question is, so, how does that affect your job? One, and two, there's obviously financial implications associated with that for everybody. Everybody's staying home, nobody's spending money. How does work happen? What if somebody's job, like, Dena's instance, her ex-husband, is required? I mean, obviously he's like, I gotta have a paycheck. So if it's going to be that I've got to still fulfill those duties, I think those are all the concerns and unanswered questions that we're going to be dealing with as we go forward in this.
Totally agree. I mean, there's obviously the federal government is putting in place plans to try to help, hourly employees and things like that who are going to be seriously affected by this. But yeah, I mean, what do you do in situations where you have to pay a child support payment, for example, or a spousal support payment, and you can't work? I mean, obviously that doesn't rise to the level of a life and death emergency, but at the same time, you may need to get relief from a court. So.
Right. And if you can't get access to that court, then, these are the kinds of things that people are going to be wrestling with in the short term, especially if it goes on beyond, a 2-week period. I always try to tell people there's legal time and there's real people time. Legal time, 2 weeks in legal time is not long, but 2 weeks in real people time is a really long time to not have a paycheck, and not being able to kind of figure out what's going to happen financially. So, it's definitely something that I think just as people we're going to have to work through. I think courts are going to be inundated. I would recommend to clients who are listening, or potential clients who, if you have a lawyer, talk to them. If you don't, you really need to contemplate timing, right? Because, right now people are kind of sitting on their hands thinking like, well, should I do anything? And, I would encourage them to really, if you're having these concerns, reach out, start formulating a plan, take some action. You may not be able to get into court, but that queue is going to get longer and longer as time goes on for people to come back in and get relief. And if you're already having those kinds of questions and concerns, I would encourage you not to wait to deal with them up front.
Another question, I guess, is, and this is kind of off it's a little bit of a change in direction. I mean, what do we tell clients about estate planning at this particular moment in time? And obviously this is, I know it's mostly striking people over the age of 50, or over the age of 60 rather, but it is a life and death kind of situation. So what are we telling people with regard to their estate plan?
Yeah, I would encourage, everybody on the panel today, we all have parents, we all have relatives, we all have friends, family. First off, everybody needs a will. If you have one, great. If you haven't updated it, it's probably a good time, to just sit down, take a look at it and see if it needs to be changed. Contact competent counsel or an attorney, have them take a look at it, give you some advice, and update that. Especially in situations like that, because right now, yes, they're saying, it does primarily affect, the elderly, people who have afflictions, but we just don't know. I mean, and you don't know, if you get infected, it could be that it's simultaneously with something else. Maybe you're suffering from the common cold or the flu, and you get something like this on top of it. Well, guess what? You're 35, but you're still susceptible. And we just all don't know. We don't know what the future holds as far as our health, or what
they say it's 21.
What's going to be presented.
They say what I read is that it's basically 21 days from the time the first virus goes up your nose to the time when you potentially could die. So it could be 21 days. So that's how serious it is.
Well, and yeah, Bryan. And if you look at that and you sit there and you think, okay, well, why do I need an estate plan, right? I mean, one, it saves your family from having to do a lot of things for you, even if it's just a physician's directive, right? There's, in Texas at least, and in Florida, it's called something different, but basically the same principle. It's just you being able to give directions to your physician about, like, if I'm super sick, how do I want medical decisions made for me at the end of my life? Or do I want to be able to pass that if I'm unable to make decisions for myself? There's medical durable power of attorneys, or actual power of attorneys that help people be in a position to be able to make decisions or help decide things as far as finances, getting access to accounts, providing for help decisions. These are all things that the law provides people the opportunity to have in place in case there's an emergency, and heaven forbid that you need it. But when you need it, by God, you're really going to wish you had it. So I really
lawyers can get this done very, very quickly, typically, too. I mean, a physician's directive or a medical power of attorney or even a simple will can be done very, very quickly, typically. So,
can I also add, too, just from outside or non-legal perspective, having these documents like power of attorney or wills in place, not only I think will obviously make it easier for the family that's in crisis, but also for the medical care professionals and hospitals to be able to make quick decisions on what's happening. As in the really severe cases need beds in ICU units, and there aren't probably enough to go around if we're talking about a ton of people getting sick. So I think having these documents in place would be beneficial for everybody.
How serious, and this is a question for the panel, how serious do you think people are taking this crisis?
Well, I would love to speak to that.
By all means.
So, I mean, obviously, I think it depends on who it is. There are a lot of people I know taking it seriously, but a lot of people I knew were really just saying, like, they're just blowing this out of proportion. This is nothing more than the flu. More people die of the flu every year. Like, why is everybody freaking out? And, like I said earlier, I'm always overcautious. I'm that way no matter what sick season it is, so I just have my little tendencies and my idiosyncrasies about, sanitizing and things like that every day, no matter what's going on. But I would just tell you that, I caught a lot of flack from people, if you will, kind of, joking around, making it fun, like, oh, you're being so ridiculous, but then now, things have changed a little bit about that, so I want to say that there's more people that at least I know personally that seem to be taking it a lot more serious now because they're understanding, okay, wait a minute, we've never shut down Major League Baseball. We've never shut down the NBA. We've never shut down schools for the flu. Like, these things don't happen. So I do think that it's definitely caught people's attention for the most part. But I think that the younger population, I don't want to give too much of a stereotype here, but, the younger population, maybe, 20s, maybe even some teenagers in that area, you still have that invincibility mindset. And so I think those are the people that we're seeing, in postings and things like that they're still carrying on that life is as usual. Because they just don't really understand, what they're possibly going to do to themselves or to somebody else.
So, Dena, how much toilet paper have you bought? just asking for a friend.
Well, I will just tell you that over 2 weeks ago, we went and did the stock up. So, because there was some concern that this may happen, and so. But I'm not going to say how many, because then people may be lined up at my door trying to buy some.
In all seriousness, though, I mean, this is something that I kind of looked at first. I'm like, how bad is it? But then I started reading and researching, as I'm the type of person that reads and researches everything. And yeah, it is pretty serious. And while the numbers don't necessarily look all that bad now, the amplification of this thing looks like it could be astronomical if we don't get. If you have a town that only has 50 ventilators, but 250 people need ventilators, that means 200 people aren't going to get it. And so that's a huge deal, and you don't want people that absolutely need medical services to not get them. And what really kind of makes me a little bit upset is you've got these, for example, with my son's activities, you've got these kind of tournament promoters that are trying to make a buck playing baseball, and they're, oh well, we're going to leave it up to your own decision, but we're going to go ahead and play anyway. And so people drag their kids out there, they drag their family out there, and 200, 300 people are going through the turnstiles at a little league baseball park over the weekend. And, that's exactly what they're trying to avoid, because, 300 people can give it to, thousands and thousands of people. So it really just kind of it seems to me that some people are really taking it seriously, but then there are others that just want to kind of scoff at it and act like it's not that big of a deal. But I think, when you realize that people are you have a limited amount of medical services, no matter what society you live in, and you're trying to flatten out that curve so that there's not an overabundance of demand. I think like my wife was saying, I mean, you have a social responsibility to do what's right.
Yeah, without a doubt, Brian. And in that, let's just put it in this context, right? It's been around 106 days. It's in 141 countries. It's on every continent. It's in every state now. Schools are shut down. Work is shut down. Flights are shut down. Countries are closing their borders. If you don't think that, let's just jump beyond this, okay? Let's say, this is weeks, months, however long it is. We come out the other end of this tunnel. If you think that people aren't going to use your behavior during this time period of crisis against you, should you behave badly? Should you make poor decisions? Should you cause people harm? Should you put their children in harm's way? Should you cause them financial decline? I promise you, it is absolutely going to come back to haunt you. So all I would encourage people at this point is to try to make smart decisions. Obviously we want you to remain calm, but think about the future. It still is out there. It's going to be out there past this. And the last thing we want is for you to put yourself in a very precarious situation that has substantial legal implications, either for your family or your finances, by, not taking it seriously now.
So we got one last question for the panel, and this kind of affects all of us because every single one of us on this panel is a parent. So have you discussed these concerns with your parents, or any of you discussed these concerns with your children?
So I've definitely discussed it with my parents. I have elderly parents. My dad is turning 69 tomorrow, and my mom is 70. And they are heavily, heavily involved in their church. They live to serve at church. And so I had to have some very difficult conversations with them about, distancing themselves, because they are in that group that they need to take care of themselves. And, it's sounded very harsh in a way, I think, because I'm saying don't go to church. I wasn't saying like forever. I was just saying for right now, just take care of yourself so that you can be back doing all the things that you want to do there when this is done. And then in regard to my son, he's 10. And, he was calling it the plague, and he still kind of calls it the plague, So we have had discussions about it. I have talked to him about how it's different, but at the same time, I don't want to terrify him. So, we're talking about like hand washing, making sure we're washing our hands good. And what does that mean? You don't wash your hands and then pick something up that hasn't been wiped down and then put food in your mouth. I mean, it's, things like that. So yes, we have had conversations. They started having those conversations the last week of school before spring break let out. But I think they were keeping it kind of mild, and so, yeah. I think that's the best way, is so that they can hear information from you, and you can sit down and explain that to them in a way that they can understand, and, really disseminate the information the way you think it should be.
Christy?
Yeah, and I just like to add to that, again, like we discussed, my boomer parents are, 65 and 70, and they live around the corner. And unfortunately, my mom, but both of them still work, and my mom has a job where she cannot telecommunicate. So when I spoke to her yesterday, she was going into work, and she is taking extra precautions. And my dad is working for an oil company that's in the middle of a now I don't know, with everything going on, in the middle of a huge sale. And so he is, consulting and trying to wrap up everything. And so he is also continuing to go to the office. And while both are in relatively good health, you just don't ever know, how something like this can affect them. So I've had conversations with them about that, and just making sure, sometimes they get wrapped up in what they're doing and watching on TV. Sometimes they're not always looking at the news every second. So, we had some conversations about that. And then with regards to my son, who's also 10, the news is on and we're trying not to scare him, but we're, letting him know that this is an issue. And he clearly understands that, he's never experienced this type of school shutdown before, with, irrespective of, hurricane, which obviously is easy to understand. But also too, here at home, I'm trying to keep a schedule on them, because it is difficult if you just let them roam and they're cooped up. Yeah, they're cooped up all day. They're cooped up all day. They're missing their friends. They're not getting exercise. So, I told my son this morning, you're going to get up, you're going to clean your room, you're going to brush your teeth and get dressed for the day, because we are on a schedule, and you will read and we will do certain things throughout the day. We will go outside and have outside time, so that we're keeping them on a schedule, because we don't know how long this will last. So I'm trying to make sure that they, maintain some sort of normal routine for the time being.
100%, Christy. I hear you on that.
All right. Well, Sam, you got anything else?
No, guys, I just would encourage everybody to, stay safe, be smart. If you have questions about legal implications, please reach out to competent counsel. They can help guide you through things you may not anticipate, whether it's divorce or modification or a pending lawsuit or something that you want to sue about. You really reach out to a lawyer. They can give you a lot of good advice. There's that attorney and counselor at law, and this is one of those times that I think lawyers are going to definitely be wearing both hats. So be safe out there and stay healthy.
Yes, and please wash your hands and follow your CDC guidelines and stay safe. And I would thank everyone for their time today, and I really appreciate our special guests joining us today. Thank you so much. And we look forward to hopefully getting back to our regularly scheduled podcast here in the very near future.
Yep. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.